An elite band of mercenary fighter pilots, known as the Valkyrie, has released intercepted communications from a select group of Guristas, identifying them as the group responsible for the recent pilot kidnappings. The current intel indicates that the pilots are being temporarily held at detention facilities spread all over New Eden, and then consolidated at several large, low-sec transportation facilities. The fate awaiting pilots at the final destination is uncertain, but fragments from the captured communications indicate that some sort of human experiments are being conducted by the Schism. The Valkyrie are urging Capsuleers to attack the Guristas detention centers and transport facilities whenever they are sighted and liberate the captured pilots before it becomes too late. For those who are less humanitarian inclined, the Valkyrie have pointed out that the Guristas facilities are also storing valuable assets that need be, as they put it, liberated. Capsuleers should hold on to all TEBS interfaces they find at these sites, as the Valkyrie technicians will be measuring their combined transmission strength for scientific purposes. The Valkyrie have stated that plans are in the works to acknowledge the efforts of the top collectors among the Capsuleers. This is Alton Hovery, reporting for The Scope.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is Hydrostatic Podcast Presents Upwell Lore Panel. Welcome once again. It is another time once again for another lore panel. We have assembled some of the greatest minds in lore in order to discuss the latest news and also to prepare all of you for what is to come with Upwell and FanFest. Or not Upwell, but Citadels and FanFest. So, without further ado, Fyridian, please introduce our panelists.
We got a great panel for you today. A lot of our favorite old people. We have Mark726 at Web Spaceships on Twitter. He is the CEO, majority shareholder, and sole employee of Project Compass Holdings. He's the author of Eve Travel and the Lore Survival Guide, and he is a lore generalist who enjoys taking long walks down the New Eden pipeline. We have Morwen Lagan back with us, at Morwen Lagan on Twitter. He's the CEO of Tyrathleon Interstellar, a small RP and lore and PvE-focused corporation in Rote Capel. He is an Eric Jalan archivist and lore generalist, and he helps maintain a number of RP community venues, including the OOC forums at Backstage. And then we also have Uriel Paradisi Anteovnuechi returning. He is at Anteovnuechi on Twitter, and good luck spelling that. He is a member of JLab and a heavy participant in lore and live events. He is especially interested in Jove and Drifter-related lore, and he's always data mining to tinfoil on the next big thing. So welcome to our three panelists.
Yes. Hey. Thank you for coming on, and thank you, Phi, for reminding me once again why I let you do the introduction of people's names. So today we have quite a few topics. It's been a little while since we've done the last lore panel, although it's worth noting that we have been putting out pretty regular updates when it comes, not regular, but we have been putting out some updates when it comes to things like major news events. We did a Valkyrie update, but we'll get to that in just a second. In the meantime, we do have some topics to go over today. First of all, we'll be going over the Drifters. And any news about that. And then the Society of the Conscious Thought has been in the news, and we will be looking at that and Project Discovery. Then we will also be looking at Project Discovery and the Sisters of Eve, Upwell Consortium, and we will be hopefully going over a FanFest lore survival guide for those of you who are looking at either watching or attending FanFest and are interested in the lore components that are going to be part of that. So, without further ado, Phi, do you have any housekeeping to go over?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that myself and Makoto Priano, who is often on our lore panels, will be at FanFest, so be sure to come say hi. I'll hopefully have some stickers there, and if you just want to talk about the lore with me, I will be happy to talk with you.
Very cool. Also, for those of you who haven't been paying attention, Hydrostatic Eve is back. We've been kind of internally calling this season 2 as we are attempting to get back on the saddle. We have released a new episode. a new update, and this, of course, lore panel makes the third thing that we are releasing this week. We also plan on doing another lore panel after FanFest to deal with all of the stuff that comes out at FanFest. So we are very much back and producing content, so it's good to be back. All that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. The first thing that we want to go into is the drifters. And thankfully, we have three of the people who have been really much on the forefront of this kind of discovery. So what has been going on when it comes to drifters?
Well, as some people might have seen in a recent scope video, the drifters left the Empire. They're not doing their incursions anymore. CCP basically pulled the content, which wasn't supposed to be permanent, for those who are disappointed or hadn't heard. We still don't actually know what they were there for, what they were doing, or what their goals were. But they did, contrary to some belief, have people running them. It was hard content compared to what most people think of when they think, group PvE. There were a couple of groups running with one method, another group that was running a different method. So in that sense, they did have people running them. I think they were kind of successful. CCP probably disagrees. There's also conflicting views over whether we kicked them out or they finished what they were doing and decided to just say, yep, we're done. We'll see you guys in the hives, which is where they supposedly are now.
Well, it is worth noting that they did, in fact, point out in the video that talks about that. They said that Capsuleers have been doing their own incursions within the hive systems, and that may have played a role as to why they pulled back to consolidate.
And it's also
totally possible
to note the same thing that's talking about us old players going into the hive systems also mentions the changes to the hives, which are very interesting, and a few new things have been going on.
Right. So why don't you go into that? What has changed in the hives?
Well, for one, the acceleration gates used to need to unlock on each side. Those are now just open, as in they were opened and we can just go through now. It was confirmed that this is on purpose and there are lore reasons for it, even though some of us are a little disappointed because it really does bring down the difficulty a little for the teamwork side of things. Beyond that,
yeah, just drifter content's hard already, but what these sites had was what some of us would call the tandem hacking, where you had to hack cans on, these sites have an entrance and then they have a split where they go off into two branches and they meet up at the end. But on these branches, there are two acceleration gates on each side that have to be unlocked by hacking a can on the other side of the site. So in order to continue through the site, you have to have two people hacking separately at the same time to open the gates on both sides, and then they have to get through and do it again. That's been completely removed. We do know there are lore reasons for it. We don't necessarily know what they are. We don't know whether the drifters removed it, whether the sleepers removed them, whether the capsuleers just broke them one too many times and then and died, or whether the sisters did something, because we know the sisters have a flotilla in each of the hive systems now.
Yep. And
so the sisters flotilla, we've heard about this in the notes, but can you describe what they actually are, what they're doing, or I guess how that works?
Well, what they seem to be doing there, it seems to be kind of a setup for an event that was either delayed or not used at this point. Something to do with collecting things and putting them into a storage unit the sisters would set up next to that flotilla. At the moment, they're basically a group of large collidable object Sisters of Eve ships, the Astro, Stratios, and Nestor, and they just kind of sit there right now. And it's available as a beacon. You can just warp directly to it if you're in any of the hive systems. It's nice to see. And that's about all it is for now.
They are gorgeous, it's true.
Yes.
And probably going to be the most Nestors you'll ever see on grid together at one time in Eve. That's probably a different topic for another podcast entirely.
So back to the hives themselves, the changes. That's not all that's changed. So now there's an entire... Well, this room existed for a little while before, but now things have changed. There's an entire new room at the very back end of the site, beyond the Drifter Hive room, called the Nexus, as it's called by CCP. And there's a gate called the Nexus Transfer Gate right in the first room of the site to get there. So it's not like you have to go all the way through to get there, though you can access it from the hive room as well. What you see there, we've described it here, I think, before. It's a gigantic spatial anomaly above and below, huge like stellar vortex. It's part of the skybox. It's not an object or anything. It just appears there, and then in the middle, where you land, there is a gigantic structure which seems to have been spun apart and broken into thousands of little pieces. It's high energy, is like sparks and lightning going in between all of them, and what we know it to be from the files and what we've seen, spoilers by the way, is that it's a gigantic sort of Stargate, or as the alignment units, the sequences, which I'll go into next, describe it, acceleration gate. Seeing what they are, it looks like the drifters want to use them, at the very least, being in the site. We don't know anything about what they're doing with them. We don't really know anything yet, but we'll probably find that in coming months. And as for... Yes?
I was just going to say, if you're worried about spoilers, this would be the time to turn off your stream and check this out later. So feel free to be spoilery, Uriel.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so I'll add some theory on what these things are after this, but I want to finish describing what we found first. So now we have, in each one of the Drifter Hive systems, there are these things called alignment units. There's alignment unit 1 on one side of the site and alignment unit 0 on the other side. If you hack these, you get these two things called sequences, the sequence 1 and sequence 0, named for whichever site you're in. And as you go to the Nexus room, there is a single can in it called the, whatever the name of the site is, repository. And you put these two things into there, and it spits out a couple drifter drugs, which you can get from the Sisters of Eve loyalty point store with AK anyhow, and a couple anti-Theer elements. So this isn't the goal of putting them in there. It's not just to get those, because what the description of the the sequences says is that they are used as a key to unlock an acceleration gate, a certain acceleration gate. And the icon for the sequences is actually almost exactly the same as the view from the gate that the pieces become from the bottom. You can actually see the gate on the Caldari Prime Pony Club website. It gets cut off at the top, but you can load the model for it, all 4 stages, and see what it turns into at the end. Also, to add the sound effects for it are really cool, and I'm really excited for those. Sounds like War of the Worlds, trumpet of the end type thing. I don't know, very cool. So next, I think, can I go into what these things might be, and everyone can say what they think?
Sure, but I just have a question.
Yeah.
While you're exploring these hives, how much are the drifters now trying to suppress your progress? Are they? I mean, obviously they're throughout the hive, right?
Yeah.
But are they in that final room?
Okay,
well,
so here, let me handle this one because I'm the FC for a lot of these. Basically, there are roaming drifter patrols throughout the entire hive systems. They bounce between the anomalies and different rooms within the hive every 30 minutes or so. And you can have like one or two of them. One or two of them might show up at once. Usually, you're not going to have more than one. There is always one drifter in the last room called a Hekanta. That's the one that's always there. It's a little bit tougher than.
Hold on. This last room is the room with the gate?
No.
No.
The Nexus room or the Anomaly Zone is kind of like a bonus room as far as the actual content of the site is concerned right now. There's, not that much in there except for shiny effects and lightning between the broken apart Jove Stargate and the repository. And even until the last patch, there wasn't even a repository in there. So right now, the hive room is still kind of the centerpiece. That's where the quote-unquote boss NPC is. That room has a Hekanta that spawns every so often, and that's how you get stuff to get, what we were jokingly calling the space bread. The roaming drifters sometimes appear in there, sometimes they don't. You also have Circadian Seekers running around. The drifters that are doing their patrols are the normal drifters you run into, in K-Space from the Jove observatories and stuff like that. So they're totally normal. The only difference between them and Hekanta actually is, I think, just that Hekanta does more damage. It's not that much different from the other ones. It behaves the same way. So the drifters do impede your progress, but only if you run into them. You're not actually guaranteed to run into any drifters the entire time you're in the site until you're in the hive room.
And do you want to mention what the Hikanta drops?
Well, yeah, we could. The Hikanta drops a couple of things. Some things more than it used to. It used to just drop Antikythera elements and an index for a different hive than the one you're in. Now it also drops blueprints for coalesced elements. It also drops some of the blue sleeper loot.
As all drifters do.
Yeah, all drifters now drop blue sleeper loot. And you basically, the indexes are what you exchange for the elements, but you have to go to a different hive. So you can't just run one of these sites and actually, get elements out of it. You actually have to run 2 sites. And ideally you run all 5, because otherwise you can't get full sets.
All right, and then so there are 5 different elements, which, like, as you pointed out, some people have started calling the space bread. And I remember that one of the big frustrations is that nobody really knows what these are for. Has that been updated at all?
Nope. We still do not. The only thing that the elements are good for is turning into coalesced elements, and we still don't even know what those are for. So, like, there have been, theories to it being related to citadels, which we've seen the build requirements for citadels, at least the ones that CCP's released. They're nowhere in there. Same thing with the Citadel Doomsdays. I don't know what, there have been some theories that, maybe they'll be used for the new Doomsday weapons coming in the Citadel expansion for, Titans. We don't know. I don't think we've seen the build requirements for those yet. Personally, I think that'd be kind of cool. We were joking at one point that it would be kind of interesting if elements were used as a fuel source for those Doomsdays. But, we just don't know because CCP hasn't made that information available to us yet.
One of the interesting things I see about the drifters, and more importantly the drifter hives, is that most of the things that are in those sites, the value of them is very, very relative, which I think is definitely not a mistake, right? Because, like, as EVE Online players, when we look at new mechanics, new features, new whatever, we immediately think, okay, ISK per hour, right? Like that's how we process EVE stuff, and this whole thing with the drifters has challenged us to kind of find other value to our time in EVE besides just how much ISK I can get out of doing this.
Yeah.
Well, some people have taken that view towards these. Like, people, we have an open channel where we kind of, we do. They're mostly public fleets. And we've had people come in and ask, so what's the ISK per hour to this? And we kind of look at them, tilt our heads, and then start laughing, because really there is no ISK per hour to this, as you just said. I mean, the values you get out of these elements are purely based on speculation for what they'll be used for. Like, we really cannot guarantee that you're going to get all that much ISK out of it, running them, because there's no use for any of the stuff that you get out of these except for the drifter drugs. So
I know that Makoto, who's another member of our panel usually, and who is unfortunately busy today, but he actually tried to sell the elements on the market to see if anybody, like a collector, would be interested, or somebody who's interested in what it might be used for. Does any of you guys know how successful that was?
Yeah. The way we've done it in the past is we're changing the way that we're doing payouts for fleets now. Is we're now just giving people elements directly. I think is how we're going to do it for this cycle. But up until now, we've basically done. You can elect when you fly in the fleet. You can elect to have a share of elements, a share of ISK, or donate stuff to the SRP, because we do lose ships through drifters after all. And the way ISK was done was basically people who wanted elements got their elements. And then a partial ISK share based on what the eventual price of the elements turned out to be. But the elements were sold on auction on the forums rather than the market, I think, because you can't really get them to move on the market right now, because I think there's just not enough volume of them and not enough interest. So we have collectors who are interested. I think Makoto might have been talking to Entity and some of the other people to see if they were interested in stuff, but we just don't, like, for the exact amount of traction. I'm not sure exactly what there is. I know that we've had buyers for the past cycles that we've done, and we haven't had too much trouble. It just sometimes takes a while because either prices need to be negotiated or auctions need to end and stuff like that. So there kind of is some desire to have them because, well, if it turns out they're super important, the people who have them will be lucky and be able to do stuff right away, and the people who don't, well, they're kind of shit out of luck.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's think about this. Let's put on some, prophecy tinfoil hat or whatever. Let's say one day these elements become very, very useful. And it's, like if I was a game designer and I needed to seed this stuff into the market, I would do something like this for a while to make it get out. And in fact, they did do this with Antikythera elements. Before we, strictly speaking, knew what Antikytheric elements were going to be used for, they started dropping. We pretty quickly learned that they were going to be in Tosis links. In this case, we aren't learning what they're going to be used for long term, but we do have reasons to suspect that they will be used for something. So I guess my question is, given the way that drifter hives function, how quickly could things be farmed out of them if they do become interesting to players? Because would it become very quickly farmed out?
No, not very. I mean, because of the respawn timers. The respawn timers have been lowered. They're not as high as they used to be. They were.
What do you mean by that?
Without going into specific
shorter
numbers,
time?
Without going to specific times, respawns are now twice as long as they used to be.
Okay, so
the
it
effective
doesn't matter.
amount you can get is half of what it used to be, and even then, the amount isn't that high because you're only getting the equivalent of, I think it's 10 elements per index, and you only get 1 index per Hikanta. So in order to get these, you basically need to sit in there for hours and hours and hours, and it takes a while. And then, if you want to actually turn these indices into new elements, you have to go through the next hive in the chain and do the whole thing again. So it's very time-consuming. It's very boring. That's why we have a fleet commissar and fleet ship poster who basically just entertains us by shit posting in local, breaking the first rule of wormhole space. But it's really not all that compelling once you're in the final parts of the site. So it's basically you're sitting there bored out of your skull playing Project Discovery, like Locke is doing right now, or just bullshitting on comms, because while you're waiting for things to respawn, there's really not that much to do.
Interesting. Okay, so, if these things become popular, then there'll be plenty of things to do, i.e. fighting other players who are trying to take it too.
Yeah, I mean, this is another reason that we wish that they hadn't removed the hacking requirement, is because we like to joke that the hive room was actually the safest place in New Eden, aside from being docked up in a station, if you ignored the presence of the Hikanta. Because once you're there, people have to have at least 2 hackers simultaneously hacking the entire site through, and you would see them coming. Unless they were in a fleet of completely combat recons, which is a little expensive to take into wormhole against drifters. So.
All right, so with all this talk about drifters, we did actually learn about a new drifter that's coming.
Yes,
we
did. Yeah.
I'll just hand this over to Uriel because you're the guy that's usually in the know with these things.
Okay, thanks. So on the 07 show, was it yesterday? It was yesterday, right?
Yesterday.
Okay, yeah. They talked about changes to capital escalations in wormholes. This is the main part of it. So we're going to have 2 new types of NPCs appearing now in wormhole space. Before this, capital escalations would just spawn a bunch of, sleeper battleships that would just, it's just harder, makes it harder to do. The original intent of that was to kind of de-incentivize people from just using capitals to wreck sleeper sites, but, that obviously just became an activity. So what they're doing now is kind of embracing that by making, instead of a ton of normal sleeper battleship NPCs, they're going to have a small number of much stronger sleepers that will appear. They're going to be called, well, right now, on Sissy, the name for the NPC is the Upgraded Sleeper Avenger, which we don't really know anything about it beyond that. It appears to be some sort of heavily modified sleeper battleship. And that's basically just going to replace the escalation content. It's not supposed to change the value at all. It just replaces the NPCs and makes it make a little more sense. Now, the second new NPC is going to appear only in C5 and C6 wormholes after completing sites. it is going to be called the Arithmos. The drifter is going to be called Arithmos, either Tyrannos Arithmos if it follows the Strategos name, or anyhow, yeah, this is the name.
We'll just call it Arithmos for now.
Yeah, Arithmos. It'll only spawn after completing C5 and C6 sleeper sites. It is going to be the strongest drifter they have made yet, which basically, think of it like the burner version of a drifter. It's going to be sort of a boss type NPC. And really, like they said, the worth of it, just killing it, you're supposed to be able to get upwards of 350 million ISK. Because it's escalation type. Not escalation, it'll spawn at the end, sorry. It can also, though, apart from wrecking every ship in your fleet, it'll persist after the site disappears and can warp around the system if you don't catch it and kill it. So if you wanted, because multiple can also be spawned, you could go into someone's wormhole and run some sites and spawn a few of these things and ignore them. They will get together eventually and fly around the system together and become, a roaming, think the normal drifters, except, however many times stronger, just flying around and possibly messing everyone up, which makes it kind of fun. The name itself, Arithmos, I don't know who found it, but we have it in the notes, is that Arithmos is the title for one of the elite tagmata, a battalion or regiment of the old Byzantine army, which is kind of making sense with all the old references the drifters have in their names to stuff. Artemis and Apollo, the two twin Greek gods. Then we have the Hekanta, who we did find the name meant. We found a couple meanings for it because there's nothing really solid, but there was, let's see, focused, was it? That was one of them. And there's also something related to
gravedigger. It's also a
there's
verb
like shields,
it's also a verb in Hebrew involving purchasing or buying stuff, I think.
There's a lot of
I was poking around last
possibilities.
night too, trying to remember what it was, and didn't get much of use out of it.
Yeah. Well, all right. That's that. And then there's the Arithmos again, which is another army rank. And then the Strategos, the Tyrannos Strategos, which still has yet to appear, Strategos is the title of a general in the ancient Greek army, if I remember correctly. So that's that for the new drifter.
Would you say that it's a coincidence that the drifters are using strong Greek influence, whereas Upwell is using Roman influence?
I wouldn't say necessarily there's a relation between the two, but the drifters using the Greek makes sense. With the Jove, we had a lot of the Jove Directorate. Jove is Roman, and their battleship, the Eidolon, is a Greek word for it's a Greek term. So, and going back, I mean, it kind of makes sense with them. We have, let's see, the Lux Kontos, which is Lance of Light. Isn't that a Greek and Roman term together? Which makes sense almost in an organic, think like scientific naming for things type of way. That's really just nice little stuff they add. It's always interesting to see, and names, especially we know Ravus loves names.
Yeah, Ravus is the name tinfoil master.
So what do you want to talk about next? That's about all for the escalation changes.
Okay, and just to verify, nobody here is very experienced in doing actual wormhole escalations, right?
Can't say I am.
Ravus would be the one to ask about that, I think, actually. Unfortunately, he's busy with real life today. So
that's fine, and that's more mechanics anyway. So to move on. Hold on, let me pull back up my notes. All right, so next we will go into the Society of Conscious Thought and Inheritance. We actually just did in the last episode that we did, the Project Discovery episode, the Know Your Lore, we had Ravus come in as a guest host for the Know Your Lore, and he and I walked through the Inheritance Chronicle. Now, obviously, everybody in this panel is very familiar with the Inheritance Chronicle and kind of at least what its implications are. But more specifically, because the Inheritance Chronicle has happened, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with the Society of Conscious Thought. So what do you guys have about the Society of Conscious Thought and the ramifications from Inheritance?
Well, I'm just going to summarize what happened in Inheritance. Basically, it takes place right after Machiraish was blown up, after scanning Jamilsorum. He wakes up back in FDZ4A and realized that the person intending on him was Veniel, an old Jovian, who actually did appear in some of the earliest chronicles in the game and was present in events for Admiral Aurea and got blown up during the event with the ambassador that got blown all over the cluster. We still have a lot of his body parts here and there. Now what happens is he's frantically, talking to Veniel, talking about how Jamil Sorum, there's something very interesting going on with her, which we know to be the other, and Veniel knows about that, and he basically has a long discussion with him. It's almost not quite dismissive, but the Jove know about Jamil Sorum. What they talk
I would
about
use is definitely dismissive. Every single time Reich tries to be like, "No, man, this is big," he's like, "Yeah, but not that big," and then moves on.
Exactly. Yeah. So the main thing this chronicle really reveals is what actually happened with Caroline's star, which was basically there was a Dyson swarm of different devices all over. Constructed by not the Jove or anyone, but they discovered it after they had moved to their space. We know now that the Talican were the ones who made this and can easily be recognized now as what are or were the most advanced race in New Eden. Basically, they can manipulate space-time to their own needs, and they're responsible for Anoikis becoming so susceptible to wormholes and all that, because they bent time space basically to make it so they could do that and travel between things at will. So the Jove, observed this lattice, and when the Salient incident happened, which is related to it, because the Salient incident is what opened the wormholes in the first place, earlier than intended, as it seems. It broke part of this lattice and messed things up. The star was already scheduled to go supernova eventually, but this only sped things up even more. And once it did, when Caroline's star appeared, the rest of the lattice basically got blown out. You see actually that in, the Emergent Threats trailer. It shattered all those other systems, blew open more wormholes. That's why we have shattered wormhole space. And it's what happened. It's what caused Thera to also go all shattered and wreck everything in the system, smaller into the system. Now, beyond that, we learn about what actually happened to the Jove. The Jove are functionally gone. The Jove Directorate is defunct. They have a few hundred Jove left, and most of them have actually, as he says, left New Eden. So what ends up happening? We also see, so interestingly enough, this whole conversation after they've left from the Clone Bay is aboard the Yoel, which is the Jove cruiser that the Yoel conference happened on. That's the conference that set up Eve Time, where we have the YC and all that from. Not to be confused with the Uli convention, which is what created Concord. So with this, Veniel tells Machi Raish and that the Jove Directorate is, defunct, and they leave its position on Concord to the Society of Conscious Thought, which at the end of the chronicle, Machi Raish appears there and, identifies with the system as the Jove delegate. So now the Society of Conscious Thought is functionally the fifth point of the star and is a little more active than the Jove Directorate. And then he asks about Upwell, which is an interesting way of just linking everything that's going on together right now, because we have yet to see why he was so interested. That's all that happened in the chronicle.
So what is the implication of Society of Conscious Thought being the fifth point of the spear? Because, the whole point is of Concord is that it's like the 5 nations, each nation being very, very powerful in and of themselves, and, this tenuous peace through effectively what, Concord in its inception was originally kind of conceptualized to be almost like a UN sort of entity. With the Jove operating as kind of the
overseer.
I was almost going to say the threat, right? Like either behave or, we won't let you play with our toys kind of sense that I've gotten from the Jove from that timeline or from that time period. But now it's like, well, all of the authority that was part of this great technological empire, the empire that proved themselves because they beat like the Amar, who at the time was considered to be undefeatable, and so gained a begrudging respect from the other 4 empires. all of a sudden, all that authority and all that power that hasn't been exercised in years is now handed over to a corporation that nobody trusts and very few people know about. Like, what is the implications in Concord and for the universe for that much power to be consolidated within a corporation?
Oh, well, at this point, and also speaking of corporations, sorry, I wanted to jump in and say the society is now, considered a functioning empire if it wants to be, because under it now also, 3 directorate corporations have been transferred to it. The corporations Genolution, Impro, and Xsense, which all operated in high security space all this time anyhow. So now if you press info on the society, you can see those 3 corporations under it. As for the implications, we can't say yet, but now we know that basically the society has full access to Concord systems. Like it has full permission for everything. I can see possibly the society being functionally in charge of them, making maybe a couple sorts of changes, maybe becoming a little less, hateful of Capsuleers as a whole, Concord. At least not, maybe not even willfully, but just because of their position on it. We know the society is responsible for the skill injectors, for one. And there's a bunch of stuff that they might be involved in, especially with Machireish during his announcement saying that they want to find a way to what words did he use? Communicate with the drifters and find mutual agreement. That's what he said.
Well, let's remember too that the society was originally founded by the Jove themselves. They were one of the Jove intermediary corps, essentially, with the rest of New Eden.
In a way.
Well, weren't they Jove-sponsored schools originally?
Yes.
What it was the society was started by a Jove. What was his name?
Your LeBron.
Gorgia Ho. Your LeBron was the one who took it over after him.
Right.
Gorgia Ho started it. And originally, it was basically just a more spiritual thing for the Jove. It did end up having lots of secret connections and things, which led to, once it was discovered, it was kind of downsized and became a little less important again. And over the years, it again did that you see a lot of that in the chronicles about it, possible involvement with Sansa's nation. The Black Mountain Chronicles, they're very interested in a lot of things, and also the End of the World Chronicles, where the society is trying to get their hands on Jamil Storm's super weapon before it blew up, of course. So they're definitely not just some sort of school, even though that's their face. Think of the Sisters, how they, are a humanitarian organization, but they do a lot more than that. It's funny that they're so comparable.
I didn't mean to imply that they were just a school, of course, and you're right, they have all that background. But what I was trying to say was that they were kind of the most public-facing part of the Jove Empire before we learned all of what went down with the Jove.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, to an extent, it makes sense that they would make the society the heirs to their legacy, in that they were connected with both the cluster and the directorate. So to make them the standard bearer of the Jove these days does make a certain amount of sense.
Yeah.
It is also worth noting, I think this was brought up by Ravis during the lore panel, but being the fifth point is actually very important, because if you notice in the Chronicle, there's a lot of infighting, especially around the Drifters in the inner chambers, and there's kind of been this
paralysis.
There's been this paralysis in the fact that the entire chambers is basically deadlocked in even vote, and so Reich stepping in isn't just like, oh, it's another face in the crowd. He literally comes in as a function of tiebreaker. So he may be able to actually influence the culture in a fairly significant way. But have we seen anything that we can think of as like an impact of him in Concord so far?
I wouldn't say so, not yet at least. But one thing that I'm thinking of in the future, how we've heard about the tribute system that they're thinking about, Concord recognizing Capsuleers for doing some things. I can see that having been a result of the society taking control of things more. Because, at the time, Concords basically obey the law to all Capsuleers, and that's all they care to say. If they're trying to recognize Capsuleers more, I'd say that probably would be, at least in part, influenced by the society. But right now, I really don't think there's anything we've seen yet.
Do we know of any like Reich obviously at this point would have a pretty deep grudge against the Jamil, but of course she's dead. So do we know?
Well, I wouldn't say so much of a grudge. He never seemed to be like that. It's more that he was horribly worried about what was happening. And
I agreed on that. He was never angry at her. He was just very concerned as to what she represented.
Exactly.
That's fair. But I guess my point is that like if she was still alive, we could easily say that Reich's primary goal right now will be to stop her, but she's already stopped. So what do you think? Like, what do you think his objective is right now? He's got X-Sense, Genolutions, Impro, and Concord pretty much locked down in a way that he's never had before. What do you think? What do you think his next move is?
If I had to guess, I would say what he wants to do is figure out the drifters and figure out what's going to be happening with them next and what we can do to not, have all-out war against them and the sleepers as a whole.
I actually slightly disagree. I think his bigger concern is going to be figuring out what the others next, and maybe the two are certainly potentially related. We don't know the relationship of those two entities yet, but I think he's going to be more focused on figuring out what the other is going to do and trying to counter its movements, I guess.
Yeah,
because at the moment
I'm with Mark on that. The other is going to be Reich's primary objective. I mean, the drifter stuff, sure, but I'm not sure how much of his comments about, we can reach a mutual understanding with the drifters. I'm not sure how much of that was just him trying to say something and look like he's doing something versus it being a genuine, the drifters seem to be kind of Jove. I'm kind of responsible for, preventing additional re-deaths since they kind of are just reanimated corpses. Let's be fair.
Right.
So
so
that actually brings up an interesting question then, because his first thing was about Upwell. So do we think that he has suspicions, or should we have suspicions that the drifters have anything to do with Upwell, if that is his primary objective?
I wouldn't say Upwell is connected to the drifters in any direct way. Maybe they've taken inspiration from technology or things like that. But looking at what they're building, these titanic, gigantic constructions, and then you have the super weapon specifically, which is essentially almost exactly the same thing as Jamil Sorum's super weapon, except, only fittable to a titanic structure. I can see there having been some sort of relation tech-wise. Maybe they've taken or researched some things, but I don't think there's a direct political connection.
It is worth noting that while the Citadel super weapon is visually reminiscent of Jamil's super weapon, there is no reason to believe, based on the description or anything that we have, that it functions like the super weapon. The super weapon itself actually wasn't electricity.
That's true.
It turned your very shields against you, crushing the ship from within. These look like fairly standard, almost like Tesla coils.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we really don't know anything enough about it yet to say. I'd love to find out, but
I specifically looked at the super weapons description because I was looking for just that kind of clue. But there is very specifically no indication or no reference besides that, tongue in cheek. Oh yeah, it'll look like it from that dev blog a long time ago.
Yeah.
There is no attachment between the Jamil super weapon and the super weapon in Citadels according to the in-game descriptions and stuff.
Right.
All right. So, anything else about the Society of Conscious Thought at this point? Do we suspect that we're going to see more movement from X-Sense, Genolutions, or Impro, or do you think his hands are busy?
Oh well, with them acting, under the Society now, I could see maybe some sort of tech type things coming out of it. Actually, specifically, one of the new super weapon types is developed by the Society of Conscious Thought. I forget which one it is, but they're not just standing still. I'll say that.
Very interesting. And of course, with skill injectors, it's obvious that the Society is very much kind of studying the very nature of the infomorph, which, I've been saying for over a year is one of the big themes of this story arc. As you can tell, there's a lot of focus on like our infomorph, what it means to have, a body versus not a body.
Specifically with the Drifters and the other, and Tukos even.
And Valkyrie.
And Valkyrie, especially that, yes.
All right, so I guess we can move on now to Project Discovery and the Sisters of Eve. In previous episodes, we've talked about the Sisters of Eve. I think in our very first episode, our very first lore panel, when we went through all of the kind of players, we talked about the Sisters of Eve. But at the time, we were mostly worried about the Sisters as being the wormhole people in Thera. Now they have come forward in a much more kind of amicable, forward-thinking kind of way and released to us Project Discovery, in which they are working with Capsuleers on a fairly neutral or positive basis. So are we seeing a new kind of Sisters of Eve? Are they begrudgingly having to accept our presence, or what can we take from all of this?
Well, I'd say on that, it's not necessarily them begrudgingly doing anything. Totally, all we know about what we're doing is we're analyzing drifter DNA samples. We don't know anything about what they're doing with that, period. We know nothing about it. We just know that what we're using is going to them. They're obviously, it seems pretty obvious that they're taking advantage of the greedy capsuleer nature by, offering rewards for doing this.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this is a continuation of their pattern with the shuttles that we've been given and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. And as for the rewards themselves, so let's see, we get, very obviously the very cool looking combat armor and the lab coats, but we also get drifter boosters and now these new facial augmentations that, apparently enhance the somatic system and things like that. They're almost reminiscent of what the drifters have in their faces, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is some relation that we just don't know about yet. Like, they're using us as a test bed for these sorts of things as well.
That's a good question. Like, the Sisters building drugs seems very unlike
It's not
them.
even that they're building them, because these are also available directly from the drifter sites. So it's basically they're taking these and giving them to us and seeing what they do. That's my thought, at least.
Very well. All right, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, so is there any other kind of news involving the Sisters? We still haven't heard why they were in Thera or anything like that. Are we just... Does it seem like everybody's kind of okay with the fact that the Sisters are doing what they're doing at this point?
I think it's more of the idea that they're there. We may want to know why, but at the moment, there's a lot more to worry about than just why they're there.
They also, despite the fact that it's clear from the chronicles that they strongly distrust the capsular community, they also don't really make it blatantly obvious to a lot of the capsular community that they might be so anti-capsular and therefore willing to play around with us as much as they have been.
Yeah, because in character, in the game, you really don't see any of that. You have the Sisters of Eve epic arc in which you actually help them, and now you have Project Discovery where you help them. We have evidence of shadiness, but
and
in
of
character,
course,
there's no way we'd know.
They keep up with the public face of, we're out here, we're saving people, we're a humanitarian organization, and they really, outside of what you see in the chronicles, really don't put off a lot of that, sketchiness that we see in the chronicles from them a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so the Sisters are still definitely remaining relevant, but it doesn't sound like we have any real new information about them, which is unfortunate. Do we have anything else to say about the Sisters? I know that you guys actually got noted by the Sisters a little while ago.
Yeah, we well, our ARC is continuing to do more research and other science goodness, and we released another similar autopsy report, not quite the same as the one that got a scope video itself, but kind of further along the lines with recovered Jove corpses from within the hives, and that got a nod in a recent article from the scope that was related to sort of the build-up before Project Discovery and referencing the SOE flotillas in wormholes.
Well, speaking of the flotillas, there's one more thing. I know I mentioned the possible scrapped or delayed content. What was actually happening? So the container that would have been there is a Sisters of Eve cold storage container. And what you would put into that were Jove tissue samples, which would have been dropped by every Circadian Seeker and Drifter battleship. Nothing rare, but you would have given them to them. Now, it was pretty obviously test content because, well, actually, not even necessarily. But the only thing you got from doing that on the test server while it was there were Sisters of Eve scanner probes. There's probably something beyond that if they actually implement it, but we do know that this isn't happening right now. And it may have been delayed just not to conflict with the upcoming events like the Guristas one that just happened, Valkyrie, all that. It could be stopped altogether. We don't know. We'll see soon, though, hopefully.
It is worth noting that there is a lot of PvE content that's kind of being slid into place and then waiting. Like, there's the tribute system, there's this stuff with the Sisters of Eve. There's a lot of different PvE kind of content that they have ready to go, but or at least we've heard about for a while and seems pretty complete, but hasn't had the trigger pulled on yet. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how things go in the next few months, especially as we pass through the Citadel expansion. But unless we have something else to talk about with the Sisters of Eve, I think that we will go for a very brief break where Locke will post the scope video of the announcement of Project Discovery, and then we will come back and discuss Upwell and the players being in the lore.
Withdrawal of drifter forces from Amar space has brought a sullen end to their attacks. The Imperial Navy has been embroiled in an endless string of staggering losses, including the assassination of Empress Jamel I, making this a much-needed reprieve. The sudden drifter pullback to the 5 known hive systems are believed to be connected to the Capsuleer reports that gate restrictions in those systems have been removed, clearing the path for Capsuleers committed to pushing back the drifter menace. The conflict has certainly taken its toll on the Amar military, and talks of the withdrawal being a reaction to Sisters of Eve, and Capsuleer actions only adds insult to injury for the Amar. Meanwhile, Sisters of Eve has launched a crowdsourced analysis of collected drifter data, entitled Project Discovery, and rallied under the banner of Citizen Science Begins With You. They hope to unlock the new drifter tech so that they may be made public and shared with all. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
And welcome back. Before we move on, I just want to address some stuff because I saw some comments during the break. Just so you guys know, our plan originally was to have our camera guy on Sissy showing you guys the newest citadels. However, this morning, Sissy did not appear to be behaving quite the way that we would have liked. So, barring that, we decided to show off Lockbox's amazing Project Discovery skills. And thankfully, we've had Yara, who is one of the top Project Discovery players and who was part of the Project Discovery episode of Hydrostatic podcast, in the channel, helping him figure out how to actually do all this. So that's why you're watching that. Normally, we like to show kind of the next stuff that's coming on, but unfortunately, we would rather give you guys a stable thing to look at than try to fight with CCP's ability to keep a test server stable on the weekend. All that being said, we shall move on to Upwell and Citadels. So here we go. I think we've talked about Upwell. I know we've talked about Upwell in like lore updates and stuff, but I think that we haven't really dug into Upwell in a lore panel. And either way, a lot of stuff has happened. Upwell has definitely shown themselves to be not just another new face on the map, but has definitely been making a name for themselves. So I guess let's actually begin at the beginning and talk about what Upwell is and how they kind of came to be.
Well, Upwell more or less just sort of appeared when a bunch of corporations basically getting together and starting this consortium. It's also described as being the first real collaboration between all the empires since the Caldari project, if I'm saying that right. Which is where we get the cloaking device and everything like that from. I think, right? Sorry, that was before my time.
Cloaking device was the biggest thing that came out of it. I don't remember how much more. I think there were some people said something about T2 also being part of that, but I don't remember that and would have to go looking it up to double check.
Right. Yeah, okay. So not to
also
give any misinformation.
It's also worth noting that exact same incident is the incident in which Fatal was struck down during, which is part of the Valkyrie plot. So we now have, at least tangentially, because they did mention the Caldari project in the formation of, in the announcement formation of Upwell. They're like, hey, remember the Caldari project? We're doing it again, which I don't know whether or not I would do that and say it that way.
We're doing it again, only this time we're not going to fuck it all up.
Yeah, only this time we're not going to let the Guristas infiltrate everything and steal it all.
Or put it in low sec, so that's nice of them.
Yep.
Any rate, so Upwell is now a thing, and basically what it is several other corporations, NPC corporations, kind of coming together under one banner to do something that has never been done before, which is basically producing things with a specific audience of capsuleers in mind. Thus, so far in the history of all of kind of New Eden, all of the technology that Empyreans or capsuleers use are basically modified versions of what the humans use in order to work with the pods and all that stuff. So this is the first time that somebody's actually building something 100% with capsuleer in mind.
Yep. And it's also not like they're any small undertaking, because, first of all, just looking at what they're making, all the new structure types, at least Citadel. We know the other structures are going to come in eventually, but these Citadels are obviously the most prevalent. You have everything, from the medium to the large to the extra large, the Keepstar, which is like the size of Iceland. The thing is pretty impressive. And they're anything but small, because with Ore involved with them and with all the corporations they have involved, they have significant wealth involved with what they're doing. The guy in charge, is the same guy who's in charge of Ore, if I'm remembering correctly.
He's the founder of Ore.
Right, the founder, yeah.
And new owner again.
Well,
yes.
Yeah. So basically, he created Ore and got really, really lucky, and he was shrewd enough to kind of keep his discoveries, his early discoveries in that area, a secret, and so became fantastically wealthy and made Ore into the powerhouse it is today. But then he trusted his buddy to kind of take over and control things, and his buddy kind of used the Mortis Legion, who had been defending Ore on contract. They were basically the mercenary, the security guards for Ore, because they didn't want to have their own military forces. But the new guy started using the Mortis Legion as kind of like a bully, like as a weapon, and struck them out against, I believe it was the Angels, I want to say. No, the Angels defended because it was the Serpentis. And what that ended up doing was making an enemy of the Serpentis, and also kind of souring the relationship between the Mortus and Ore, which led to a hostile takeover by the Serpentis a few years later, in which Yara, who is the founder, basically blames on his friend, who's no longer his friend, and vowed to one day take back Ore. And it would seem that Upwell was his ticket to that.
Right. Yeah. So basically that's it for that. Let's see. Anything else we could detail on Upwell?
Sure. So basically, Upwell has been striking out against the Serpentis. The Serpentis stole a bunch of stuff from Upwell, and Upwell seemed to want it back. However, it's worth noting that when we went to go do the attacks, we didn't actually collect any information from the Serpentis. So it almost feels like we were used as bullies against the Serpentis, and that the premise was kind of flimsy.
Almost certainly, yeah. I mean, because also they didn't ask for anything back. They just wanted us to stop the Serpentis from leaving with all the assets they had taken. We were getting, well, not just all the clothing, but then we got like the endurance blueprints and all the other stuff it dropped.
Yeah, the logistics frigates
Upwell
blueprints were also dropping.
Upwell surrendered it all to us. Like, that's what they said in the scope news things. Also, that's where they also talked about the significant wealth of Upwell, because they're just able to just give all that up and just give it to us as reward, as an incentive to stop the Serpentis from escaping with their assets. I wouldn't think the plex that sometime dropped were that big, but that was interesting too. These events have been very fun.
Yes, absolutely. So there was a research race, as we're talking about, and I have a note here that Makoto wants to give a shout out to the Signal Cartel, and a congratulations specifically to Nava Idios for winning the research race. I think that was pretty cool, and resulted in the winners being posted on the new billboard system. So it's really cool how CCP is working to make sure that these events not only give something for everybody to do, but also allows the universe itself to kind of see and interact with player effort, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, it makes total sense. And it's great because lately we have, especially the last year or so, the new line of the lore is basically, it's taking the main line of it and also connecting it with what the players are doing. And I think that's really great because it's making a much more cohesive sort of experience.
Yeah.
Not to mention, the scope always talking, the scope now especially talking about current events and what's actually going on, giving it in character context, which I love.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how they're tying in player actions with what's going on, and while still keeping the storyline their own. I suppose they're reacting as well as providing content. That's really cool to see.
Which is exactly what we've been asking for the last year. I specifically said, I want to see what Amar have to say about this thing that players did, or whatever. And we're definitely seeing that going in that direction, where individual player effort or even collective player effort is in fact being noticed by the universe players themselves, which is pretty cool. Additionally, I also have a note here, and somebody's going to have to elaborate because I'm not even sure what the details of this is, but I have a note that says that the fighting with the Serpentis with Upwell has spread into Gunjack.
Okay, I think the reference there is that Gunjack takes place on the Kubera, which is that the Kubera is basically this super huge mining platform thing owned by Ore. It also has a sister platform called Hisar, which is referenced in the latest scope video in the ticker. And basically, Gunjack is, you are a turret gunner on the Kubera. As far as I know, I don't have any of the VR stuff, so I can't say for certain. But I'm pretty sure that's basically the premise. There was a news, either article or a couple of references in Scope News tickers about the Kubera being attacked by the Serpentis and having to be returned for repairs, and it was just redeployed.
All right, and have any of you guys played the Gunjack? Do you know what the storyline in that game is?
There's really, when I played it at Eve New England, at that point I know there really wasn't that much of a story. I don't know if there really is at all, because it's basically just a fun little VR game. You're sitting in the turret and shooting. It was a lot of fun to play, but I don't know how much of a story there actually is to it. That may have changed by now, but I don't know.
Well, it is worth noting that they, like you just said, or like Norwin just pointed out, it was the main location of Gunjack was in the news as it was being moved, I believe, into a more safer area, which at the very least seems to be a clear indicator from me that they're not done with whatever they have to do with Gunjack, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so do we have anything else about Upwell? Yeah, no, so a bunch of new corps have also been joining Upwell. Like, it seems to be that Upwell is kind of the place to be if you are an up and coming not necessarily high tier, but mid tier corporation within New Eden, you're either in Upwell or trying to become part of Upwell. So we've also gained Freedom Extension, Propel Dynamics, and even Interbus is now going to be working with Upwell. Propel Dynamics. Sorry?
So I was just going to mention how Interbus is basically also being used as the context for the asset safety and all the movement stuff for the assets.
Right, and Interbus is always is the same people that do insurance and stuff, right?
No, I think that's Pend Insurance,
No,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's Pend.
Okay. So what is Interbus's primary function in the universe right now?
Transport.
Interbus was created by the four empires to try to provide essentially public transportation system throughout the cluster. They're supposed to be scrupulously neutral, very protective of their routes that they use, but also supposed to be very well regarded even by like the pirate factions to let them go unscathed throughout the entirety of the cluster.
Everybody needs to get somewhere.
Yep.
All right.
They also got screwed over when they bought up all the Pocos in HiSec just before the Pocos became blow-upable.
That's right.
That was a great chronicle, frankly. It's just you have the Interbus guys. They purchase all these Pocos, and then there's this whole dawning realization. Oh yeah, by the way, these are being made available for capsulers to dismantle in their usual manner. And there's just this. You can kind of feel the oh shit crawling into the Interbus guy's head through the entire chronicle.
He was so excited, the poor guy.
Well, now Interbus has what's potentially going to be their most lucrative contract yet, because although people, I've heard a lot of players talking about the citadels and their destruction, and a lot of players saying, oh well, it's not going to matter because you can just recover your stuff. That ain't cheap, and it ain't instant. And Interbus is going to make a lot of money off of players with trying to save their assets.
Yeah, but you know what would be an even more lucrative deal for Interbus? Having their own actual station. CCP. Come on, let's see that. Come on, guys.
Well, they were originally supposed to provide. I think I remember reading somewhere back in the day that they were supposed to actually provide like transit service if you wanted to ship your stuff in some fashion, but that just never got implemented.
Yeah, NPC courier services.
CCP Affinity mentioned that might be part of the patrols once they make full implementation.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting. Wasn't that at Vegas where they talked about that? I know I wasn't there, but everything was relayed.
Yep.
Actually, speaking of the patrols as well, we also know for sure about the capital NPCs that are going to be appearing. Sorry, because I know we didn't mention it earlier. We're going to have pirate faction. Well, they're not unique, but they're there. It's a pirate faction Titan, Carrier, and Super Carrier for each of the pirate factions, and they're going to be fightable. It's basically capital PvE content. This was also talked about on the 07 show yesterday, if you want to go watch that. They talked about a lot
Thursday,
on that.
Technically.
Thursday, yeah.
Which has some pretty crazy implications, because thus so far the pirates haven't really had that much capital resources at their own disposal. Like, I remember when we were talking about the Valkyrie Chronicle, or the Valkyrie stuff, the theft of the supercarrier was a big deal because that gave the Guristas a supercarrier. And it's a little bit different if like they already have their own Titans. It's just interesting. All right, so what about Freedom Extension? That's another one of the new groups that have joined Upwell, correct? Do we know anything about them, or should I move on to Propel?
I actually know very little about them, so...
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, they're not one of the ones I'm fully aware of. They,
Well, that's the big thing about a lot of these guys, is that a lot
they're
of
unknowns. They're the third-rate teams, as I think we've called them in past floor panels.
Yeah, so not all of them are very big deals. However, one of them is a big deal. Propel Dynamics has shown up in the news quite a bit before. And in fact, our very own Ravis has called them out for their work on the Stratios hull. But Propel in particular is one of the people that we've been kind of watching as one of the people that might have been smuggling out drifter technology. Is that correct? Or am I the only one that's that crazy? Should I explain myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
All
Go
right.
ahead. But if you want, I did check up on what Freedom Extension is. They're basically a Minmatar courier corporation, so they're probably helping Interbus move stuff around.
Very well. Or perhaps just helping haul all of the stuff for the construction of these citadels, because it is not a small effort. Let's just say that. No, so my whole thing was that, Propel Dynamics was on the Stratios hull, which the Stratios has the ring on the outside, which is, demonstrates the fact that the Stratios uses a different form of system than we're used to. And since Propel Dynamics was on the side, there's a good chance that was the people who added in that propulsion system, and that the effects that we see around the ring are very similar to the spatial distortions that we see in drifter technology. So the idea was, through the sisters, Propel may have been experimenting with drifter technology prior to it even becoming a big deal. Again,
not to mention,
I might be the only one that thinks this.
Well,
no,
we
I
do
think
have
there's a lot of validity to it. Look at Thera, the research stations especially, where they're researching sleeper technology and Talican stuff too, all of which seems pretty closely related to both the drifters and possibly the Sisters of Eve technology, cloaking technology, propulsion, looking at the ring especially.
Yeah, and don't forget, there's also that one station where in the description it talks about how they may have actually captured a live or functioning sleeper drone.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and then the Minmatar, the Thucker caravan mentioned, the Thucker caravan that was responsible for the Salin incident can also be seen in that system, which I think is great. Just somehow ended up there after the explosion.
All right. So, is there anything else involving Upwell or the Citadel construction? I know that there's the new Palatine Creep Star, but I'm not sure if that's going to be quite a lore thing necessarily. Unless one of the things that I would like to see with the Palatine is that Upwell themselves construct the Citadel, and then whoever wants to take it has to first kill it. But on the other hand, on the other shoe, I would like to say that we shouldn't see what the Palatine Keepstar looks like until it's constructed. But I guess that's pretty much of a digression. But does anybody have anything to throw in with that topic?
it's kind of a wishful thinking because of the way the interface works now, because you can preview anything that has this in-space component to it.
Sure,
It's
we can
basically-
preview it, but we can't see its size and scale.
Well, it's a Keepstar, so it's as big as a Keepstar.
Yeah, it just has a different color scheme. The Palatine
Incorrect.
color scheme.
Its signature radius is actually increased by 25%, implying that it's 25% bigger than the Keepstar.
That's awesome. Then. Maybe we'll see. We'll see what they do.
Radius isn't the greatest thing.
I said implying. I said implying.
It's just that the gold plating reflects the sensors back, so it just looks bigger because it's so ostentatious and gaudy.
Yeah, you can see the sunlight reflecting off of it 5 systems away.
Well, all right. In fact, actually, it's funny that you say that, because when the Palatine was first being discovered, one of the weird things that people quote unquote leaked, but I've never been able to verify, was that when it becomes reinforced, it can be seen anywhere in the universe. I simply think that that's
that would
wishful
be really
thinking.
Awesome.
That it starts out at 5 systems, but then the person controlling it can train a level 5 skill up to universe-wide visualization.
There you go.
That's 100% a joke.
All right.
Although, if people have not seen the build requirements for these things, we're talking on the order of hundreds of trillions.
Yeah, at least around 200 trillion.
1 to 200 trillion ISK in order to
I
build the
think I
materials
saw
for one of these.
115 trillion floating around.
I think
with
that was
the build
after
costs.
I think that was after research and not doing it in JITA or something like that. If you build it in JITA unresearched, it's like 200 trillion ISK, and it's like it's on the order of I think 10 to 12 trillion ISK just to install the job in JITA.
To put that to scale, the actual real life value for that is something like $3 million. So
yeah.
I actually.
So anyway,
I wrote the post for Crossing Zebras for that, and they made me they were like, oh, you gotta put this into perspective, and so I had to crunch the numbers. It is the equivalent of 1,000 Avatar Titans or the equivalent of 10 BTAC-Rs all at the same time.
And Fozzie was joking about starting an internal pool in CCP to see how long it takes for the first one to be built. He's saying he personally doesn't expect one to be built for about a year after they're released, or at least sometime next year, because of how much money is required and the materials and the resources.
Locke and I are really hoping that they change this and make it so that there are 2 or 3 totally unique variants of the Keepstar. Or the Palatine, just so that like it's not just one person has it, but there are 3 things to topple over.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of cool if you had you could have multiple, but they had to be a certain distance away from each other, so you could have one in the north, one in the west, or something like that, but not too close. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it works out, because this one per New Eden, one per cluster thing is kind of cool. But if it's going to take a year for the first one to get built, it kind of seems to remove part of the purpose of having it. I mean, yes, half the purpose is EPing, but if you're also planning on actually using it, it's still just a Keepstar. It can still be destroyed, presumably about as easily as a regular Keepstar, which isn't that easy. But as far as I know, there aren't actually any real differences except for the build cost and the visuals.
Well, there's double hit points, so it'll take twice as long to siege. And also, it has an additional, I think it's 2 additional mid slots and an additional low slot. Okay. It is, so Fozzie has said that it is a faction citadel. That is effectively what it is. It is the Upwell faction citadel. So it's also worth noting that he said that nothing about this is reasonable. So, the expectation of it being like 1 per, whatever, it's all just a complete pie in the sky. Let's see if they even bite on it. Which, speaking of which, actually, I was on Talking in Stations yesterday with Matterall, and we had the guy from I Want ISK, who is, of course, funding the gigantic war that's going on. And there were people that were suggesting that if he can pay for this war, he might want his very own golden castle. And he hadn't heard of it yet, so we may actually have our very first financier. We don't know.
Well, the other thing is, Fozzie's right when he says nothing about this is reasonable. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this is, in some ways, CCP making fun of themselves, because they went, there was this whole joke about how when Titans were first introduced, it was like, oh, there's probably never going to be more than a handful in game, or maybe 1 or 2 for large alliances kind of thing. And now they're like freaking everywhere. You need a can of Raid to get rid of them. They're like literally everywhere. It's like walking on cockroaches in a dump. It's.
But of course, the best thing about this is that it's like Civilization 5, where like Egypt is researching the pyramids and you manage to get the pyramids down first. Like, it's going to generate so much animosity between people if you're stuck sitting on the materials and like the final built one when somebody else's Palatine Citadel goes up, that I think that this is going to be really fun.
Well, right. You can have as many of them built in the game as you want. There's an unlimited number of them can be built, but only 1 can be anchored.
But when you say that, let's again.
It's not that meaningful when you consider the cost of the damn thing.
Yeah, let's remember. I doubt that people are going to just have 120 trillion ISK, Palatine Citadels kicking around in their hangar, just waiting for the opportunity to anchor it one day.
You say that now.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
All right, so I digress. We should probably refocus and move on to the next topic. And I actually,
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, so I am going to jump over to another topic which we haven't prepared ahead of time, but it's something I definitely wanted to ask, and if you guys don't know, then that's fine and we can move on, which is that with all of this news with Valkyrie and whatnot, I want to say, and I've been looking for it, I want to say that there's been more and more reports of the Caldari corporations, like the mega corporations, infighting and spying even more than normal. Like, there's a lot of unrest within the state at the moment. Do you guys have anything to say about that, or am I just barking up a bad tree?
Well, I did notice there was an interesting thing ticker notice in one of the 2 World War B scope updates that the Home Guard had reopened their investigation into Tibus Heth, and I found that very interesting.
Yeah,
speaking of
that led to some fun tinfoil between me and Makoto. Was like I said, so wouldn't it be kind of funny if it turned out that Heth is running the schism and working with the Guristas now? You know, it's like, boy, that would make some people's blood boil.
Well, what happened with Heth in the first place? When we don't know for sure if he's dead, because what they found was
his
by the way,
wristwatch.
in a spaceship wreck in ships with signs of energy damage. In a place where there was a Sancha incursion at the time. So, yeah. It looks like, and it also mentioned specifically that the ship had been boarded, if I remember correctly.
Well, okay, but all jokes aside, like, from what we know about the Guristas, Fatal and the Rabbit, and what we know about Heth, what is the chances that Heth would defect and join the Guristas?
Honestly, I can't say. I don't know. But it'd be interesting. It'd be very interesting to see him pop up again, because he was a very interesting character.
Well, I mean, because of the way that he went away, we wouldn't even be sure that it would be the same Heth coming back. I mean, we've had a lot of other sort of shells come back who are not at all like they were in their first incarnation.
That's a good point. Although, do we want to really briefly kind of explain who Heth is, since he has been in the news again, and why it is interesting that he might come back?
Well, anyone else want to take this? I know a good amount about him, but if anyone knows
you
more,
can take it. That's fine.
Yeah,
all right,
you can take it first.
What I know about him, he appeared in the Empyrean Age. He was the guy who, he appeared. Was it before Empyrean Age he appeared, or okay, whatever.
Well, I can actually just answer this one quickly. Empyrean Age covered all of the events that were going on the news a couple weeks prior to the downtime events, because back when Empyrean Age was launched, CCP had a habit of doing more or less like 12-hour downtimes for the expansion deployments, and we would have uninteractable breaking news reports every half hour or so, and so we had a lot of stuff going from that. But the stuff Heth's involvement started prior to that, but the news articles that we saw at the time were happening at the same time as all of the events in the book.
Right. Yeah. So basically, he became the guy in charge of the Caldari state after a rebellion on, I forget which corporation it was. He was basically a person working there, and he ended up also. So the broker gets involved with this. It's a very complicated thing. Basically, the broker ends up basically putting him in charge of the Caldari state by the end of it, which feels kind of like a cop-out in a way, because the broker became, in the Tony Gonzalez books, more of a Deus Ex Machina, which was kind of a problem. But what Heth became was pretty interesting, because he was in charge of the Caldari state. He was a Templi Striganar, which was basically a hyper patriot Caldari group. He was in charge of things for a while. Was he the reason they put the Leviathan over Caldari Prime? I remember him being involved with that, and when that finally went down and all, things started heating up with Caldari again, up to the point where we had the events where him and a lot of others, defected once bad things happened, and we ended up hunting them down, which were fun events. I got destroyed every time, but that was fun. And then he ended up disappearing with that last news article, and we haven't seen him since.
Right, so this is a bad guy for the state that's very kind of charismatic and has a lot of followers, who's mysteriously vanished.
Actually, I'd compare him to how the Mittani is being shown in the last scope video specifically. That reminded me a lot of him.
Actually, I was actually going to say he reminds me of kind of a pre-totally gone zombie world Sancha.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, well, the thing is, all we know is that the people who attacked used energy weapons. We don't necessarily know whether that's Sancha, the Blood Raiders, the Sisters of Eve, for whatever reason. It could have been the Sisters of Eve. Hell, it could have been the Drifters of the Sleepers, for all we know. No, I mean, really don't know anything about who did anything to it.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, Sancha was a war a war profiteer, or made arms for the Caldari Galente War, and then he
Yes.
went off and did his own thing. I see this is kind of like Heth, like almost following in those footsteps. It's also worth noting that there is another pirate faction that needs to emerge. So you never know.
That's very true. Yeah, Caldari and Minmatar. We still don't have one for that.
And whoever happens to follow Heth would be a really good candidate for that combination.
That's very true. Especially
Dun,
considering
dun,
how
dun.
much he hates the Galente. We know there wouldn't be another Caldari Galente pirate faction ever.
Right. Well, also, Galente Minmatar relationships have become kind of sour recently. So
Oh yeah.
if there's a really powerful Caldari militant, he might be able to convince subsects of the Minmatar to no longer like the Galente.
Yeah, maybe, but also if we, I think Uriel found this, or maybe it was Darkblade. The descriptions for some of the new Doomsday weapons actually say that the RSS, the Republic Security Service, we're going, oh, we should spy on the Galente and nick their shit for the new Doomsday weapons they're working on. And Shakur was like, how about we just ask? And they asked, and they got designs. It's like, it's like totally not really the expected response from Shakur of all people, based on history of him being somebody who just kind of stabs people in the back without thinking about it, or rather, not necessarily stabbing people in the back, but breaking treaties and all that stuff just to get his way. So to see him taking a thoughtful diplomatic approach is kind of new. But on the other hand, it implies that maybe things are starting to be a little bit more smoothed over. Since the incident with Nijlar and Brutal.
It is worth noting that Rodin and the Minmatar government have kind of had a very long-standing. It's almost like mutual blackmail. They function very much like House of Cards with the Russians and the Americans. All right. So, anything else about the state, or really any of the four empires, and kind of how the relationships between them are dissolving as we continue to march towards a four-way war? All right.
All right. Well, I don't know about this four-way war thing. I mean, we were supposed to get that last year, but
It's true. Well, no, to be fair, she said that depending on how things play out and what happens with the players, the target was end of year, but it might take longer depending on how it plays out. And to be fair, there's been a lot of focus on not four-way war by the player base.
Well, the thing is that there's also been a lot of focus on things that really didn't have to do with the factions or the alliances butting around with each other. It's mostly been just stuff internal to the Amar or the Drifters. And
well, it's
so
very
it's like,
pirate focused.
The other thing is that they haven't given us that much to interact with to push the storyline in one way or another at all since the first mention of it at FanFest last year.
I guess that's true. Although I would counter that to say that, like, there have been, like I said, there has been a lot of stuff going on, but the focus has been about kind of the smaller entities, the pirates and whatnot. And I think that part of the reason why is because as they're experimenting with these events, they definitely have been leveraging the holiday nature of them. And with the pirates being as diverse as they are, they just make a really good candidate for targets for holiday events, right? Like, because I need a Halloween event. Oh, the Blood Raiders fit right in. I need a winter event. Oh, well, an ice mining frigate. Oh, I need a Easter event. Guristas bunny, whatever. Like, so I think that they've kind of taken the limelight due to necessity of other pieces of how kind of CCP is evolving the game. All that being said, I think I will segue into the next part, which is we definitely wanted to highlight the fact that CCP has been really focusing on player lore and player interaction within the lore. So as kind of our final segment, I said earlier that we're going to do a FanFest lore survival guide at the end of the show. Totally lied. So our
Boo.
No, it's coming. It's coming. But the problem is that I really wanted Liz to be on, or Liz, however you pronounce her name, to be on in order to go into the Amar stuff again, because she did such a fantastic job kind of showcasing it last time. So what I will be doing is I will be working with her in order to make a special kind of lore update to release as kind of the FanFest lore survival guide. So expect that to be coming eventually. But since she can't be here, she and I have been coordinating to do that later. So she's busy doing her own lore stuff right now. So we will continue on with the World War B news. And I'm actually really excited about the fact that we can bring up World War B, or the Great War, or whatever you want to call it, in the context of a lore guide, because I think this is one of the very first wars that is completely player driven, but yet the lore has responded to. Correct?
Well, I mean, if we don't count the first ones where they started, mentioning when we started doing the hydrostatic lore panels.
Well, I mean, so there has been plenty of wars like the Fountain War and all that stuff, but the actual powers that be, the universe itself, doesn't really seem to react to that. Whereas in this case, not only have we gotten two very player-focused scope videos in a row, which they have also released scope videos kind of saying, oh, well, this happened with players. But this is the first time where it's this is what's happening. It's like breaking news. The scope is reporting on what the shenanigans of the Empyreans are doing. And also, almost all of the tickers have been dedicated to demonstrating that all of New Eden is having to deal with the fact that this war is happening. Various different entities are moving assets in different places. I think actually the movement of the Kubera by Or was because all of those NPC null entities are very nervous now because Null is on fire.
I also really appreciated the tickers about the Caldari having to reinforce their customs checkpoints and whatnot.
Yeah.
This is all good and fine, but I'm hugely disappointed by the fact that they created a goatee for the Matani's character in the scope video, and then did not put that into the game as an item so that we can all wear the goatee, either in support or protest.
So you had the World War B for hat, or World War goatee for as a facial thing. Yeah.
So a year ago we were like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if the universe responded more? And now that they've done that, our response is, where's my t-shirt?
Yeah, pretty much.
Or goatee.
I actually know that's a really great idea. If the art department could figure out a way to knock something out to release it in time. I mean, can you imagine that? For maybe $5 or whatever worth of Aurum, you could get some sort of item that is related to what side you're on in this particular war, and you just keep it forever. Yeah, that would sell. I'm pretty sure that would sell.
Yeah, but to go back to the original topic, yes, I definitely agree. What we're seeing here is the first time that the player activities are being put front and center. Is the other thing. As you said, we've seen mentions of different player goings on in the news ticker. There have been references to petitions that ARC has put out relating to recent events. There's been references to faction warfare pushes, different nullsec goings on, stations and systems being captured, skirmishes out there. But this is really the first time that CCP has gone, there's something big going on. Let's take the focus away from the universe going on, that's moving without the players, and focus on what the players are doing.
I think it's really
what
great.
happened is the roles are reversed this time, because normally we would be seeing stuff about preparations for the finals of the secession trials, and then news about this war in the north and World War B in the ticker. Instead, we have World War B as the front and center stuff, and references to the secession trials finals in the ticker, which is kind of cool.
one of the biggest things I'm looking at with that specifically is this is basically one of the biggest wars we've had ever in EVE, and it's amazing. And it's, for one, really cool for the players, but it's also great publicity because, I mean, look at all the exposure CCP is going to be getting through this. We have this going on, and we have Citadel coming out. We know they're going to have a trailer for EVE Citadel, so that's going to be even more wow factor. So when people are seeing all this at the same time, it's probably going to be a nice boost to the game, which means more content for us and more money for CCP, which is just good all around.
And more lore.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's actually worth noting. It was just brought to our attention by the comments, or at least it was brought to my attention, that the updates.eveonline.com page now actually has an entire page dedicated to World War B, and it's called World War B, the Battle of MTech OEE 8. And so, like I said, the CCP has definitely acknowledged that this is the kind of thing that they need to mobilize on. And so, seeing this much effort by CCP to show it off is incredible. The big thing about this scope video that I think that other people, other scope videos have kind of showcased player actions before. However, the big thing that was for me was all of the other scope videos have shown things that have happened, right? So they're reporting on a fight or on a soft change or on Test losing a bunch of people or, whatever. They've reported on things that have happened, which is good from CCP's point of view. That's a safe thing to do, right? Because it's already happened. Something won't change, whatever. They're not relying on the players to cooperate. However, yesterday on Friday, when they released the special edition scope video, this is the first week that we've had 2 scope videos in the same week, by the way. They talked about what was about to happen. They actually used the entire scope video, or at least the second half of the scope video, to propel the State of the Union address and the fights that were going to go down that day, which is important because CCP in the past have avoided directly influencing the sandbox and whatnot, but I think that this showcases kind of an option that they have in their reserve to say, well, this is important enough, it's locked in enough, and, this is the kind of thing that the news reports would be interested in. And so they trusted Goonswarm, and specifically the Mittani, to actually do what they expected them to do. And I talked to somebody at CCP, I can't remember who, but I asked him, like, well, did you guys read what the Mittani was going to say first? And they said, no, we just, we knew that they were going to do it, so, whatever. And I think that not only is really cool, but shows a fantastic amount of trust. And so whatever you want to say about this war and who's on it, or what you think about the Mittani, what you think about the Imperium, what you think about the Good Guys Brigade, or whatever they want to call themselves, the fact that moment of coordination where CCP and the lore and the publicity handed it over to a player, and then that player picked up that baton and ran with it, and that momentum kept up through the entire day, I think that was incredible and needs to be, showcased.
It's almost as if CCP got together a little while ago and had a series of meetings where the question is, what do we do if another big war breaks out? And so we see updates.eveonline.com going out. Uriel just dredged up in the April 5th update. There are literally going to be portrait backgrounds to show your support for one side or the other in the war, which we were just talking about. So CCP is really on the ball as far as what kinds of things that they're doing with this war in a way that they've never been before.
Which is great, because I think that, the more that we can bridge things between people, I think that, in the old guard in EVE definitely has this mentality that the lore isn't important. And, it's the same idea, like, oh, EVE has sound, oh, nobody pays attention to the lore, blah, blah, blah. But that is definitely changing, that as we kind of intermingle, in-game events and, actor kind of story and player story, I think it becomes more interesting to more people all told.
I'd like to point out that Uriel dredges up this thing about the new portrait backgrounds regarding the war, but it also says, more importantly, considering, or at least to some of us, considering we talked about this earlier, there's also going to be an Upwell themed background.
Very
that looks like fun
interesting.
stuff. And I'm assuming there'll be more than just those 3 anyhow. So we'll see. That'll be fun to look at. I'll probably post stuff to Twitter when I see them.
And maybe we'll actually get the Matiga Sea Beast skins this time around.
Actually, let's see.
We were supposed to get them last month and we didn't get them at all.
If it's talking about April 5th, those things should be on Sissy, shouldn't they?
The skins are on CC in the database.
I mean,
I just don't think they're
backgrounds.
purchasable.
The backgrounds I meant. We can check those out later.
Yeah, we'd have to see if the server was up, but
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at this time, we are running out of time, and we have gotten a few questions. Fi, do you want to manage the Q&A portion?
Oh, I can certainly try. We're actually going to skip the questions about the apostle, because we're going to talk about that a little later, not in this episode.
All right.
There is a question about the couple of hundred Jove that are left and the Jove corporations joining the SOTC, and whether those corporations actually have any Jove in them at this point. So who wants to take that?
I can take that. So from alterations, alteration is involved. He asked about the apostle, which again we're skipping for now. Sorry about that, but you'll find out. And the next question was, so the Society of Conscious Thought has now the Jove voice. What happened to the Jove? I'll say it's really all just shown in Inheritance, which is a great chronicle read, seriously. It's one of the best ones I've read in a long time. It's wicked interesting. If anyone wants to link that in the chat, that'd be great. Basically, the Jove are very few now, and they're all leaving New Eden, and they're leaving it all to the Society because they're going beyond. Next question from him is, any speculation of what is going to happen with the Society of Conscious Thought and the Drifters? We really don't have much to go off yet for that, but I'm interested to see too. I could see Society trying to, like he said already, like Machiraish said in his announcement, trying to find a mutual understanding, which I think would be personally great, because at the time, up until now also, the only way we've been able to interact with the Drifters has been to shoot them, and I'd be very interested to see something else happen, especially with the prospect of their getting more ships eventually, possibly, including a capital ship. So the last thing I want to do is just keep shooting them. I want to be finding out what's going on, and the Society is definitely more interested in that than shooting them. So I could see them trying to reach out to them more.
And to be clear, those questions came from Alterations Involved and forsooth Raphael in the Twitch chat.
Right, actually, his questions are next. So he talked about he said, you mentioned 3 Jove corporations joining the Society. What are they responsible for? So the 3 ones that are joining are Genolution, Impro, and Xsense. Genolution is basically the premier clone producing corporation in New Eden. They're basically responsible for a lot of it in the beginning. I think it's hold on. You can actually see all the descriptions in Dotlin in the game. I'm pretty sure that was what Genolution was specifically. They also make, the Genolution implants that we use, so they're involved with that sort of thing. Impro is just a high-tech company that produces, just high-tech devices throughout high-security space in New Eden. And Xsense made boosters, but when those became illegal, it says in their description that they stopped, but you can assume that they still did research and that sort of thing. And the second part of that question was, aren't there just a couple of hundred Jove left? Do they fill the corporations with non-Jovians? Yes, actually, because the ones that operate in HiSec, and even as far as we know, and the Society of Conscious Thought, they're basically all non-Jove at this point. The Jove, again, have basically disappeared from everything. Even within the Society, they don't see Jove anywhere anymore. The last one they saw was Veniel, and that was an extremely rare occurrence. Basically, it's all human. We don't know how much they knew about what was going on. Maybe not much at all, actually. But we know, it's not like they just suddenly decided to replace people. They were just almost all human by this point anyhow. If not all, just normal people.
And it's been that way for a while. As far as I remember, there was talk even in the early chronicles about how most of the lower and middle management were non-Jove, and that only very few people spoke to Jove higher-ups who actually own the corporations, and obviously they probably haven't heard much from them lately.
We have in the YouTube chat from Jacek Kalisuk, where are the Jove going?
That we don't know for sure, but we know they're leaving New Eden.
Probably
Going
joining
west.
Gandalf in the west.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's basically like a literal going west over like what the elves New Eden now.
They are. If I had to guess in an actual semi-serious manner, they're probably trying to. Whoever is remaining is trying to track down wherever the Telecan left.
Yeah,
if I
that
had
would
to
definitely
take
be
a guess,
possible.
But
So you think the Jove are following the Telecan?
I think
They might be
that's my
trying
personal-
to.
That's my personal opinion.
It's. I mean, what else is there for them to do? I mean, it's basically there's so few of them left. The Jovian disease is, will wreck their shit, at some point sooner or later if it's not already doing so. To the individual Jove, that is. So there's really try and find the Talican in the hope that they might help, or just to see what's going on and maybe report back as kind of a last, here you go to everybody. Or put yourselves into cryostasis or sleep or something like that, like the sleepers. There's really not that many options for the Jove with the numbers they have.
Although I could see possibly us seeing Veniel at some point in the game in the future, because he appears to be still hanging around.
Yeah, like Captain Crutches and No Way in the Twitch chat are saying, this is a very popular trope in science fiction and fantasy. So it's very much like the elves or several of the other ancient races that we see.
It is worth noting that Stargates are going to be opening up new sections of space. So whether or not that is Jove space or perhaps trying to follow where the Jove went, who knows?
I think it may be a combination of that, honestly. Possibly one of the first couple of systems, maybe the new system we may see. Maybe us connecting to an old, Jove system. Maybe W477P, just for lore, fun reasons, and
I
seeing
would
what's
love
happening
to
there.
go there.
Heck, actually, speaking of that, what I didn't get to mention earlier was the tinfoil on the Jove Stargate. Well, not Jove Stargate, the one in the Drifter systems. We know that when Caroline's star blew, every gate connected to it, huge amounts of energy went through, and everything overloaded to the point it exploded. Looking at the ones in the Drifter Hive systems, and the amount of, distortion and energy and the huge vortexes and the gates being blown apart like that, I see it being at least a possibility that they lead to W477P and that we may be able to reach there if once those things advance, which would be awesome.
The real question will be whether we actually want to be there. I know you guys want to explore it, but there might be hazards there.
Exactly, yeah.
The terrors of the deep.
Supernova remnants at the very least.
Hell, maybe that's
what
where the
eldritch
Drifters went.
Talican horrors await us there.
Actually, yeah, it's interesting, because what if the Drifters are related out there sometime? Because we know their technical headquarters is the old headquarters of the Jove Director, which is in Jove space. Maybe that's where they're holding up.
Well, I think that's more a game mechanics thing than it is a lore thing. I think we have to be careful about that, because remember, it was originally stated to be, I think it was MTAC-M, Stucker Mix.
Yeah,
Station.
somewhere out in the Great Wildlands.
Back when they started the Drifter stuff, before they actually eventually showed up in game. So.
All right. Any other questions?
I did not see any.
All right, and that is the top of the hour. So that probably about wraps it up for us. I guess we will go down the line for any sort of final thoughts and then sign off. Opening back up Mumble. All right, so does anybody have any final thoughts that they're interested in saying before you go? Dreaded is recruiting. I think that's mine. I think I'm morally obligated to give that at this point, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that one out of the way, does anybody else have anything important to say?
Keep up the good work, CCP. The new version of the lore guide's out. The next version of the lore guide will be out shortly after FanFest to update who wins the succession trials.
I like how the lore has become so fast moving at this point that you have to put out your lore guide and then already be planning the next update.
It's turning into more work than I initially anticipated. That is accurate.
Good thing that Ravis and I are around to help out, right?
Thank goodness for that.
And
All
just
those wiki links, Jesus, man.
Oh my gosh, that was a pain in the butt.
all right. And so, and actually, yeah. So the here's my question for you guys. For those of us who are interested in kind of exploring the Eve lore and pulling things together, I've noticed that at this point, any sort of attempt to Google things will lead you to dead links at the old wiki. What would you guys advise somebody do in the interim if they are interested in kind of piecing together the actual lore?
Okay,
Read my lore guide.
Yeah, okay, so that's 3 things. 1, read Mark's lore guide. 2, you can either use the Internet Wayback Machine if you want to, or 3, Backstage actually has a backup wiki on it that should have, I believe it should have all of the lore and chronicle and player content on it. So, and of course, if there's like a broken page or something, like just ping me on Slack and I can fix it. It takes about 30 seconds to do. We just can't keep track of which pages are working and which aren't. It has something to do with the way that CCP provided the backup that they provided to us. Just when you re-import it, it does something weird with the revision history. So there are definitely replacements.
And with all that being said, if there's nothing else,
I would like to, as always, express our deepest gratitude to our Patreon patrons, and hopefully the amount of content we put out in the last 5 days and are planning on in the next few months will make you guys happy that you have contributed to the cause. But we appreciate you as always.
that is correct. We actually already are starting to line up some very exciting guests, and excited, I hope. So, we've got more content coming for you guys, and we will continue to focus on kind of, what has always made Hydrostatic really good, which is, not so much news, but, always getting the experts in to evaluate EVE Online and put the game into perspective for all of you. So we're excited with what we got for Season 2, and thank you for your guys' support so far. Anything else?
Yeah, actually, the only thing I kind of want to, the 2 things I want to add. One is that Makoto's not here, so he would probably want somebody to remind people that Ikame is recruiting, and the Arataka Research Consortium operations are ongoing. We run Drifter Hive fleets once or twice a week. You can find us in the channel Consortium Operations. It's pretty much just open to anybody, except for people who have kind of targeted us for hostile stuff, or tried to disrupt the stuff. But generally, we're open. Fleets are fairly low SP requirement, cheap and very easy to get into. We always give people new bro speeches who need them. We're always looking for more pilots. So.
Also, aren't you guys holding a competition right now for a new logo?
Yes, that's also true. ARC is doing a little competition for a alliance logo because 1, we now actually have an official alliance, and 2, Makoto is giving a Drifter presentation at FanFest, and he would like to have a formal logo to put on the slides and stuff like that. So I don't have the thread link handy, but we can get it from Makoto later tonight and make sure that it's included with the show summary notes afterwards.
And if any of you listeners wish to get a hold of any of us, you can. All of us are on Twitter on our various different links. At this point, I'm not even going to list them off because we actually have a lot of people that aren't here as well, and they are worth getting a hold of as well. However, if you want to go to where we all are at, all of us hang out in the Tweet Fleet Slack, in the lore channel and elsewhere, and we are happy to join or have more people join our tinfoil ranks. I have always been proud of the fact that the lore channel is one of the most popular, active, and on topic usually channels in Slack. So if this is the kind of stuff that excites you, please come and join us, because it actually is a pretty fun place, and we are not all that weird. All right, so all that being said, thank you all for listening. This has been our pre-FanFest Valkyrie Upwell lore panel. I can't even remember. Oh, no, Citadel lore panel. That's the name that we originally set, or that we finally settled on.
Upwell. It's about Upwell.
Yes, it's about Upwell. All right, so thank you for listening to the Upwell lore panel. On behalf of Fyridian, Lockfox, Uriel, Mark, Morwin, and myself, it is not how much SP you have, it's what you know.